The second thing that's useful is proximity. So this is the second tip. Why do I say proximity? I'll tell you. So I've just made a joke about Tamás, okay, being Hungarian, and saying, now who would be interested in Tamás being Hungarian? South Africans, not so much, but Hungarians, yes. So there's probably there is a Hungarian club in Johannesburg, and don't you think that they would be interested in Sándor and Tamás being part of Toastmasters? Of course they would, because they're Hungarians. You see what's happening here? It's close to home then. So this headline says South Africa teams up with Japan. Now, when was the last time you saw Japan in the headlines? Every now and then, there's an earthquake, right? It affects a lot of people, an earthquake. But and there's Tibor, of course, from Transformers. So you don't see Japan in the headlines much, or Malaysia. But here we've got a South African science and technology team teaming up with Japan. And that means that it's interesting to us as South Africans. Does that make sense? So that's proximity. The third one is prominence. Now, here is the front page from some newspapers around the world. This one over here is the Financial Times. GE, General Electric, right? This is the big issue. The big issue is sold to help unemployed people make money. Now, who's their target audience? The big issue. The target audience is anybody driving past my intersection who has a car. So that's a hell of a difficult target audience, because how do you segment them? You can't really segment them geographically, because you want to sell that same issue all over the country. You want to sell the same issue in Cape Town and Joburg. You can't really segment them demographically, because who drives cars? Old people drive cars, young people drive cars, people with parents, people with kids, people without kids. It's hard to segment demographically. And what about psychographically? Well, everybody drives cars, so it doesn't matter what career they are. Practically everybody with any money at all drives a car. So it's very, very difficult to specify your target market, and that's why it's so difficult. So what do they rely on? They rely on, here it says, Natalie Portman. Now, Natalie Portman is a famous actress, and so they're relying on what they call prominence, something that's prominence. It says the top cop, make our day. And so they're trying to appeal to our sense of prominence. We human beings are very interested in famous people. There's the Hello magazine, there's all of these magazines, and it turns out that monkeys and, well, not monkeys, apes, I beg your pardon, not monkeys, apes, chimpanzees will pay, they will trade food coupons to look at photographs of high-ranking apes, of high-ranking chimpanzees. Isn't that interesting? Oh, go on. Andrew's counting my R's. That's very unkind, Andrew. You need to tell me up front that you're going to be counting R's. I'm shocked now. Okay. So, how do you get weird and corporate? I was coming to that. I hope that I've answered your question a little bit. I hope I've answered your question a little bit with that Hungarian example or a blind woman example, but I'll come to that in a moment. So we are trained to look for prominent people. How does this help us at Toastmasters? Well, there are some very prominent people who've been Toastmasters and who are Toastmasters. That person who owns the Lollipop Lounge, her name is Gigi, right? She is a member at the Toastmasters Club, Business Engaged Toastmasters, out in Sunninghill. So we would use her as a way of attaching our name to somebody prominent. Here we have authority. The next one is authority. And that's a little bit different from prominence. What that means is an authority, we can believe an authority. So if we say, like I've just told you, for example, that apes or chimpanzees will trade food coupons for watching pictures of prominent apes. Did I cite a reference for that? I didn't, because I can't remember the reference. I can't remember the study. I do know that I've read it, and I've read it more than once. It would be much more credible if I cited that authority. Yeah, right, says David Priest. So you see, so he's being skeptical. But when we invoke authority, then that is a way of making sure that our article gets read. Now, the next one is conflict. Conflict is Conflict is incredibly important. Conflict is incredibly important in making your content credible. I'll give you an example. You've probably heard the story before, and I just want you to pay attention to the story because I'm going to tell it slightly different from how you know it. This is the story. Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Little Red Riding Hood. And she was called this because wherever she went, she wore a Little Red Riding Hood. And one day, her mother said, please take this basket of goodies to your grandmother in the forest. And Little Red Riding Hood said, certainly, Mum. And then Mummy said, don't dawdle on the way. Now, Little Red Riding Hood was a good little girl, and she didn't dawdle on the way. She went straight to grandmother's house, where they enjoyed a lovely lunch. The end. Now, what's wrong with the story that I just told you? There's no conflict. There's no big bad wolf. Now, I always feel sorry. Yeah, it's a boring story. And why is it boring? Because there's no conflict. And I always say, I always feel sorry for the woodcutter, because everybody remembers the big bad wolf. But what about the poor woodcutter who saved everybody? Okay? So our job as Toastmasters, if you think about the speeches that we make, the inspirational ones anyway, tell us about a failure, something that went wrong. And then how do we get out of that thing that went wrong? Does that make sense? And so we as human beings are hardwired to understand that as a story, structure. We want to see crisis. We want to see conflict. We want to see goodies and baddies. Now, who is the goodie? The goodie is Toastmasters. Who, you see now, Louis, I knew that you would be interested in this. Louis has told me that, he says, conflict is core to all storytelling, fairy tales, movies, novels, and even speeches. Louis is 100% correct, and Louis is a master. He is a master. It's very, very, very frustrating speaking in a contest with Louis because I always come second or third or fourth. And Louis always wins. In both languages, English and Afrikaans, it's very, very frustrating. But Louis understands more than many people that I've met the purpose of conflict in speaking and in storytelling. So we need a villain. Now, who is the villain? The villain is, it doesn't have to be a person. You see that suspense I'm giving you now. Who is the villain? The villain could be a lack of self-confidence. The villain could be, no, David Priest is not the villain. So I'll give you an example from my own world. In the old days, before I was district governor, I would say to people, how many Toastmasters clubs do we have? And people wouldn't know, and I would say, we have 125. And then I would say, how many people are there in District 74? And then people wouldn't know, and then I would say 110 million. And then people would be shocked. And then I would say, how many people per club is that? And people wouldn't know. And then I would say, it's too many. And then I would start talking about districts around the world. And I would say, okay, think about New Zealand. New Zealand's got 4 million people. It's got 250 clubs. And if we had the same penetration of clubs as New Zealand, we would have 6,875 clubs. Now, normally I would round that up to 7,000, but in fact, we've only got 125 clubs. So our whole district is a rounding error. So that is a joke. And then I would go through all of these places, and then people would think, wow, what is the villain here? And the villain is, we didn't have the willingness to grow. We didn't believe that we could grow. And what I said was, at the end of it, when I'd done the arithmetic, there's a district called District 85, and they have a division with 20 clubs in it. So far, so good, not very unusual, but they've only got 200,000 people in that whole division. So that's one club for every 10,000 people. And if we had the same penetration as District 85, which, by the way, is the island of Curaçao, not exactly a financial hub, not exactly a tourist hub, 95% non-English speaking, 95% black, so it looks a lot like our district, right? If we had the same number of Toastmasters Club as Curaçao, we would have 11,000 Toastmasters Club.
Wow.
Not 125. And then all of a sudden people could see, now I've kept them in suspense. So where's the conflict there? The conflict there is what is keeping us back? What is holding us back? And I think what is holding us back is our own belief that we could never grow at more than 3%, because we just couldn't do it. And I think with that speech, I show that not only is it possible, but it's necessary to grow at a huge rate. And that year, we grew by 17.8%. I was aiming for 20, so I'm sorry about that. I didn't miss it. But ever since then, we've grown at almost a club a month. Since then, we've added a net gain of 1 club per month since then. So it's not all bad, right? We are. No, Ben, I don't have that speech recorded. Sorry. But I'll tell you what. Invite me to Sandton, and I'll give that speech if you like. I would be happy to. I would be happy to. Okay, so now Judith is talking about what might we do for the South African economy, and I'll come to that in a moment. So that's conflict. You have to have conflict in an article. You have to have a goodie and a baddie. The goodie might be will be Toastmasters and the Toastmasters program. The baddie might be a lack of self-confidence. I couldn't get ahead. I couldn't get a date, and so on. The next one is impact. Now, when I talk about impact, I'm saying how many people care. Remember what we said about news. News has to be 100% of the target audience. Otherwise, it's not news. So what impact is this making? That is why natural disasters always make the front page. Natural disasters make the front page because they affect a lot of people. And if you've ever seen the Malaysian air disaster, what happened? Were there any South Africans on board? The German air disaster, the airways disaster, were there any South Africans on board? That's the proximity one, right? But that is what affects us. So something that affects a lot of people has got impact. Something that affects a few people, no impact. That is why it's difficult for us to get into business day, because we only have, that's why it's hard for us to sell conference sponsorships. We've only got 2,500 members, so we don't have a lot of impact. Even if we affect everybody on Toastmasters, it's only 2,500 people. We've got to think bigger, which is Judith's point in a moment. But you understand impact. How many people do we affect? And the more, the better. So if we affect Sandton, that's great. But if we affect the whole of Joburg, that's even better. So that's why I always try and build our conference, our speech contest, as the All Africa Speech Contest. It isn't anymore because there's a West African speech contest now. They've got a district up there now. But in the old days, it used to be the All Africa Speech Contest. And that's bigger than it's. Somebody was saying it's a sensational headline. Of course it is. It's bigger than it sounds. But at least we're trying to have a bit of an impact. Does that make sense? And then finally, cheerio, Ben. Finally, here you go, is suspense. Now, here is an interesting thing about suspense. Is the repo rate going to go up? So I remember reading on the newspaper on the Monday, the headline was, is the Reserve Bank going to raise or lower the repo rate? On the Tuesday, the headline was, is the Reserve Bank going to raise or lower the repo rate? On Wednesday, the front page headline on Business Day was, is the Reserve Bank going to raise or lower the repo rate? On Thursday, they had their meeting. On Thursday, the repo rate had stayed the same, or it had gone up, or it had gone down. On Friday, no more news. So what was keeping that article alive? It was the suspense. Will they, won't they, will they, won't they, will they, won't they, will they, won't they? Will we win, won't we win? That's the big news on a point at the moment. Is Zoya going to win? Is she ready? What can we do to make sure she's ready? What's the competition going to be like? Once she's won or lost, well, she either won or lost. End of story. Does it make sense? So those are some of the, it sounds like dating. You know, David, it is a lot like dating. I've actually got something about dating over here. Here you go. So this is my slide about dating. Can you guys see the screen? So you've got women and men on the call here tonight. Right. So to the women, I want to ask you this question. Have you ever been on a date like this? The guy comes to you and he's got a beautiful car. It's all clean. He's cleaned the car for you. He's on time. In fact, he's 5 minutes late. He's got flowers for you. It's fantastic. He waits for you while you get ready. He doesn't push you. He goes outside. He opens the car door for you. You drive a short distance to the restaurant where he's made a booking. It's a beautiful restaurant. It's got white tablecloths. It's got crystal glasses. He pours you a glass of wine, and he starts having a chat. And he says to you, I've got this beautiful car, and I've got another car in the garage, and this is the kind of car that I drive. I live in this kind of house. This is how much money I earn. Last year, I went to this place on holiday. I've got a boat on the Vaal. Right. It was all me, 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 me. I'm going to ask you a question. You've been on that date, right? Does the guy ever get a second date? No. Now, guys, there you go. Maybe if you haven't got a second date in your life, look at your approach. There's a wonderful story about Benjamin Disraeli and the other guy, Gladstone, William Gladstone. And they were both running for Prime Minister in the same week, obviously. And they both took Lady Astor out in the same week to dinner. And the journalists got hold of the story, and of course they spoke to Lady Astor and said, how did it go? And Lady Astor said, when I was with William Gladstone and I had dinner with him, I knew he was the most intelligent man in all of England. And she said, and Benjamin Disraeli, she said, when I went to dinner with Benjamin Disraeli, I realized I was the most intelligent woman in all of England. Who won the election? Benjamin Disraeli won the election. Because he understood the value of listening. He understood as something relevant to the target audience of one. You've got to make something compelling and funny and interesting and relevant and authoritative and compelling to that audience of one. And the way to do that, of course, on a date is to listen. And in a strange way, when we are writing our blog posts, we are writing our articles, we are going to listen. We are going to listen to what the audience wants. And who is the audience? We have to think about who is the audience first, exactly like speech making. And we're going to listen to what does the audience want, exactly as speech taking. Now, I'm going to go through some specific tips now to talk about some angles. What I'd like to do is I'd like you, please, to recap. What have you found that's been interesting or useful that you have found that you can take with you to your next article or to your next speech? Just give me some summary, please, in the text box, and in fact you can speak as well. Unmute your telephone, and I'll recognize your name as it flashes up, and then we'll go. Anybody? Andrew, could you do me a favor? Could you take that counter sheet and could you throw it away and start again, please? All right. Anybody got any ideas of what we've discussed today or tonight that's been useful or interesting? Because I've got a home stretch to go, and I want to make sure that all right. Alison says, I want to think about who the audience is first, and then think about how to persuade them to read what I've written. That is correct. Michael says, different ways of classifying the audience. David says, try to create suspense. Absolutely right. And the best way of creating suspense, yeah, absolutely right. What we talked about also applies to speech writing. That's what Carol Ann says from Somerset West. Using conflict to captivate the audience. That could work with testimonials. Seppo, I've got an interesting story about that. A friend of mine went to America to look for a job. I learned Erich has 17 R's, 8 M's, and 9 repeats. In half an hour. I don't think that's bad, actually. I'll be honest with you. My friend Paul went to live in America, and I got a call from his new employer. Please could I give him a reference? Now, this was from America, and this is serious. And they said, please tell me about Paul. So I said, he's very focused, he's very organized, he's very diligent, he pays a lot of attention to detail. And then I said, I have found that working with Paul, it's best to give him a lot of structure. He really thrives, oops, bless you. He really thrives in an environment where there's a lot of structure. So I gave him almost a negative critique there. Do you see what I did there? Normally you're expecting a guy who's giving you a reference to only say positive things. But if I only say positive things, how credible am I when I say that? I'm not credible. If a salesman comes to you and says, here's your proposal, it will cost you R1 million, there's your proposal, and it's going to work, and it will be there, it'll be on time, it'll be perfect. That's salesman A. Salesman B comes along and says, here's your proposal, it's going to cost you R1 million, it should come in on time and on budget. These are the things that we've learned about things that have gone wrong. This went wrong, and this is how we fixed it. This went wrong, and this is how we fixed it. This went wrong, This went wrong, we didn't fix that, we lost that contract. And I'll tell you something else, there's some certain things here that we're not sure that we're going to get right. Who are you going to take on board as your supplier? You're going to take the second guy because you believe him, because he's saying negative things. He's creating that conflict. Mm. And that credibility is built by creating that conflict. He seems more authentic. Does that make sense? So Tsepo, that's what I wanted to say about being slightly negative. Personal stories. Now, personal stories do not always capture the audience in print. They do in a sense, but they also don't. We'll talk a little bit about them. They do have to be personal, but they're not personal to the audience. Of course, if you're writing a blog post, that has to be personal. But if you're writing an article, that's not personal to you. It has to be personal to the audience. All right. So conflict, a lot of people are talking about conflict. People love stories, Louis says, where they can put themselves in that situation. They can identify with something, and that is the audience that we're writing to. Absolutely right. If you try and think of your audience, you see, Louis is a master at this. It's very depressing. Okay, so Caroline says, what does Toastmaster do for them? Absolutely right. How can we put the them in the front of that sentence? So you are this kind of person. How are you going to solve it? You tried this, you tried Dale Carnegie, you tried going to speech coaching, but the thing that really helped was Toastmasters. That's your hero's journey. Change division. Oh, I must change division. I'm in division L, David, for the moment. All right. So I want to talk about some specific ideas, some specific tips that we can use now. And Louis, this is a lot for you, but for the whole team, on how we can start organizing our own blogs, how we can start writing compelling content for people. The first thing is this. You're working on a 6 to 8 week deadline. If you're working on a monthly magazine, we're sitting now at the end of June, 1st of July is tomorrow. They are already working on the September issue of Cosmopolitan. In fact, the September issue is almost finished. They are busy commissioning pieces for the October issue of Men's Health, for Cosmopolitan, for all of these monthly magazines. So don't think that we're writing now. In fact, if you've got an idea for an article in August, it's too late. So your first job is to think, who is my target market? That's your first thing. So I've got a thing called the 90-second plan. Excuse me. And it's not the 90-second plan after the 91st plan, no. It's a 90-second plan because each step takes 30 seconds. 30, 60, 90 seconds. The first thing you think is, who is the audience? That's the first 30 seconds. And you think, where do they live? Who are they? Demographically, what language do they speak? And then psychographically, what are they interested in? Number two, what are they interested in? And I promise you the answer is not Toastmasters. The answer is, what am I interested in? I'm interested in my kids because, you know, my 9-year-old is struggling at school. David knows the story. Tim knows the story. He's a little boy. He's a big boy, he'll tell me. I'm interested in my kids. I'm interested in cars at the moment because I have to upgrade my wife's car because we've got 3 kids and they're getting bigger. So these are the things that I'm interested in. I am not interested in Toastmasters. Does that make sense? I'm not. And the third thing is, so who is the audience? What are their concerns? What are they interested in? And then only, how can we meet their concerns as Toastmasters? So that's my 90-second plan. And in the beginning, it's worthwhile writing down what those 3 things are. Now, here are some tips. Number 1, write yourself a calendar. Sounds ridiculous, but it's true. What happens in August? Women's Month. So you just write that down. This is an interesting thing. What happens in October? Well, what happens in November? December is Thanksgiving in America, but it's becoming quite big here. December is Christmas. I don't know if you've heard of Christmas. It's a Christian festival. It's a joke. January, New Year's resolutions. February, Valentine's Day. March, Human Rights Day. Also, Namibian National Day. April, South African National Day. Also, Easter, another Christian festival. April. May, Wekha's Day. June, Youth Day. July, it's the middle of bloody winter. And at the beginning of the Toastmasters year. That's not really relevant. Can you see what I'm trying to do here? I'm just trying to get some hooks around the year that I can hang articles on. There might be an international day there's like an international, all sorts of days. International Arbor Day, there's probably International Big Toe Day at this point. So there's International Earth Day, and there's International Earth Hour, and there's, you know what else is in July? Is Mandela Day, 67 minutes for Mandela. 18th of July, I think. So these are just hooks that you can start thinking, okay, women, it just gives you an idea. If I was talking to lovers around Valentine's Day, what would I say to them? Where Toastmasters would be the solution. So what is the problem? Somebody said, there you go, it was Shakshi. She says, December, January, appraisals at work. Time to talk yourself up. How do you ace your appraisal? Fantastic, Shakshi. In October, it's often budget season in the big corporates. So how do we talk ourselves up? How do we make sure that we're getting those budgets sorted out? Great. You also might have some things at your work where there are specific occasions or specific days. That is called a feature schedule. Now, if you approach the media, if you phone any of these media, you phone, and Margie will tell you, if you phone your target media, whoever they may be, you will find that they will tell you a feature schedule. So if you phone Engineering News, they will send you a list of all the things they've got planned per week for the rest of the year. Per week. So they've got, in week 52, they've got a focus on logistics. In week 13, they've got a focus on pumps and valves, for example. So these are useful things to know. The second thing you can do is think of what irritates you or think of what you enjoy. Just like you would do, what I try to do when I'm doing a CC, for example, is I take the 10 speeches and I try and just brainstorm topics that I could talk about. So I brainstorm 10 topics or 8 topics or 12 topics, and then I try and reverse engineer and say, okay, I thought about talking about the traffic. Okay, let me make that a humorous speech. So let me make that a CC 6. I quite like that one. Or I might have a speech like this one, where it's resource intensive, so I'll make that a CC 7. Or something will lend itself to structure, and I'll make that a CC 2. So that way you can almost reverse engineer it. So think about your own feature list. What do you want to highlight through the year? Or through the next 6 months or through the next season? What do you want to talk about? Spring, summer, autumn, winter, those are also useful things, just as sparks for ideas. You might also think about your target markets. So you might be an engineer, or you might work in, as Louis does, you might work in the media industry. So your target market might be fellow media professionals, or you might be an engineer, or you might be an accountant. We've got people from KPMG, we've got people from Grant Thornton. You might be a consultant like I am. So how would you then talk to those people, consultants, and what are they interested in? They're interested in improving their billable hours. They're interested in improving their rates. They're interested in keeping their clients. How do you keep your clients happy? What are they interested in? They might be interested in how do you run a team? How do I make sure that this is the right team for me? So these are all things that we can think about in terms of our target market. So there's two quick tips. The first one, think about your target market. The second one is to think about the year, the chronology of the year. The third tip, and this does not come naturally to people, but let me tell you, it works. Margie will tell you, bless you. Work in a team. So Margie phoned me up and said, what do you think about this? And Margie and I just sat and we chatted for 5 minutes over the phone, and we came up with an angle, and as we came up with an angle, the other one strengthened the angle, and then it bounced back to me, so Andrew said January is my birthday. So what is it about birthdays that is useful? Maybe birthdays as a topic is useful because you want to have impact. You can't talk just about my birthday. What is it about birthdays? So here's an idea about birthdays. Think about, okay, I've got a challenge for you. I've got a challenge for everybody on call. Mm-hmm. The topic is birthdays. How do we get an angle, so brainstorm an angle around birthdays that publicizes Toastmasters? I'm waiting. I have an idea. I wouldn't be this unless I had an idea.
Oh, my. That's a hard one, Erich.
Difficulty.
Birthdays. Oh, clever.
So, okay. So what do you get at birthdays?
Erich?
What's the big thing about
Erich?
birthdays? I'm listening.
It's Louis speaking. Normally around about my birthday, I normally take stock of my life because it's in April. So I've got January, taking stock, April, which is my birthday, taking stock, and at the starting of spring, taking stock. So it's like 3 stages in my year that I kind of just look at where I am. Am I still where I want to be? Am I just old and going nowhere, or am I actually progressing in life?
Louis, this is why you are the master. Paul, you got it as well. You are a master. I'll give you some ideas here. So that's one idea, right? Here's another idea. Birthday's on the 29th of February. So Tamasha's got a birthday on the 29th of February. That's very rare. So what does it mean to have a birthday every 4 years? So that's just an interesting idea. Modafantine held a first birthday celebration and we publicized it. People love anniversaries. Second birthday is not interesting. But a 5th birthday, yes. A 7th birthday, not interesting. A 10th birthday, yes. People love anniversaries. Transformers recently had their 600th meeting.
Sure.
And that kind of stuff is news. It's unusual, and it's news. Right. David said, maybe we can talk about special occasion speeches. How do you make a speech for a 21st birthday, for example? So that would be useful for people of a certain age. Oh, Transformers is already going for their 700th meeting. So of a certain age, you've got friends whose daughters are turning 21, if you're going to, or your own child is turning 21. What do you look for in a speech like that? Here's another one. You could give Toastmasters membership as a gift to somebody. Isn't that an interesting idea?
My goodness.
Isn't that an interesting idea? So I had a slightly different thought based on an article that I read today or yesterday about birthday gifts. What is it about birthday presents that we enjoy? Very often it's something lavish. It's consumer electronics. It's something we bought as a candle or a bottle of wine, something that doesn't really mean very much. Wouldn't it make more sense to give them something more personal, something that you've written yourself about them? In German, there's a concept called, that's only one Andrew. There's a concept called a Festschrift, and that means a festival writing. And what happens is when people reach their 80th birthday or their 75th birthday, all their friends and their community writes, they contribute to a body of writing called a Festschrift, a body of writing about that person's life, or about themselves and how that person has touched their life. Isn't that a wonderful gift? And how do you learn that? You learn that at Toastmasters. So can you see what happened? When I asked one person, it's a hell of a hard, but when you start typing at each other, all of a sudden, even a very difficult thing like, how do I fit a birthday into the newspaper or into a magazine? Wow, you start thinking of all these different ideas. So I always say writing is a team sport. What other angles can we think of? DTM is always a useful one. We only had 13 DTMs or 11 DTMs last year, I think, which is, by the way, twice as many as the year before. So we're obviously doing something right. Rod Taylor once worked out that to get a DTM takes as many hours as an MBA. Now, we are not equating a DTM with an MBA, but what we are saying is that the same amount of time goes into it. And if the same amount of time goes into it, you are not a master of business administration, you are a master of business, what? Assertiveness, master of business, what? Does it make sense? So, can you see how we can take that and turn it into something interesting? Right. David, what about humor? Humor is very, very difficult to get across. Typically, you're trying only to go right straight. Don't try and be funny. People's senses of humor are different, and people don't often appreciate the humor. And so unless it's very clearly flagged as a humorous piece, it can come across badly, and you can really get burned quite badly. I'm just going back here. A Master of Communication and Leadership, says Smaggy. Very good. So your MBA. So there's your MCL, right? Your Master of Communication. And what does that mean? That means it's not about being the master. It's about what is the impact that we can have. And the impact that we can have. So I'll give you an example. Just this afternoon, got the go-ahead to do some work at ESCOM. One of ESCOM's divisions has asked me to come in because they just need a little bit of some training and a little bit of motivation. They asked me for a little bit of team building. So I said, sure. So we've got 6 sessions there, 1 a week in Bitbank somewhere. So that's awesome, right? Oh, I'm still online. Am I still online?
You are there, Erich. We can hear you. All going well.
God. Thank God. Thank goodness. Thank you, Maggie. Now, that's awesome. But, you know, my co-facilitator on this said, we are now helping keep the lights on. So that's nice for us. But my plan is to go and start a Toastmasters club there in Bitbank. Why? Because Toastmasters teaches us about servant leadership. And if we if we had more servant leadership in this country, our country would be better. And where do you learn it? You learn it at Toastmasters. So we're now talking about Emalahleni, so not Bitbank, sorry. Sorry, Lynette, you're absolutely right. Emalahleni, I should know that. So I'm always constantly trying to say, Toastmasters is a little thing. How do I make sure that I grow the impact of what Toastmasters means into something big? Oh yeah, Swartbank they call it. Yeah, I'm just going through the. Excuse me, while I just go through the. Florida is 3 meetings away from their 900th meeting apparently, so that's very interesting. These are the birthday ones. Somebody was saying about humor. Do you have any questions quickly for me? Yeah, no, sorry, it keeps popping me to the end of the thing. If you have any questions that you'd like me to cover quickly. And then I want to just wrap up. So if you just want to give me some questions that you'd like me to answer. Is there anything that I haven't covered that you'd like me to quickly cover? Or have I done a reasonable job in covering what you wanted to do?
Erich, I've just got a question. You said that writing is a team sport. Do you have any suggestions for us that are geographically separate from one another to
Okay, Louis gone off there.
Have a brainstorm, get some ideas on the table of what to write, and then how to take it.
So Louis, from your point of view, what you want to do is divvy up the writing to make sure that you've got some local stories, some monthly stories, some weekly stories, some daily stories, some feature type stories, some news type stories. So you want to get a kind of a mix of stories, and you and I are in the same town, so we can sit and talk about that. How do you do it? Well, there are people who are close to each other. And so my suggestion is email each. I've got another 10 minutes to go. Email each other the draft of a story, or just the draft of a story or a headline, and say, what do you think of? I'm thinking of writing an article about birthdays as a gift, or birthdays as a time of reflection. What do you think? And then somebody will come back to you and say, but Toastmasters is also in itself a gift. Wow. So what have I done for myself this year? I've given myself the gift of Toastmasters. And what's nice about that is I have to renew that gift every 6 months. So there's something that was added to your original idea, even though you didn't think, even though you had already said it's time for reflection. So just email somebody, I promise you, 2 lines, and they will come back to you with a better idea. But do that, really, or even SMS them. I really recommend it. And the idea there is not to say yes, but. The idea is to build on the person's idea. Don't say yes, but, say yes, and. Other ideas? There is one thing that I wanted to talk. Okay, somebody said, what about setting up a PR group on Facebook? That's not a terrible idea. That's actually not a bad idea. Now, I want to talk a little bit about interviewing people. What will sometimes happen is you will interview somebody and you will send them the draft and they will hate it. This happened to Zoya. Zoya was interviewed by the Star newspaper. I thought it went very well. I didn't sit in on the interview, but I did see the resulting article, and I thought it was lovely. Zoya hated it. So 2 things will happen. Number 1, you'll be interviewed by the journalist, and when you get off the stage and the journalist writes it, you'll think that was the most horrible piece ever written about me. I hate all the media. If they spelt your name right, it's good publicity.
Wow.
And remember, no 2 people hear the same speech. So if you see something, you think, wow, that's not what I said, don't blame the writer, blame the interviewee, because they weren't clear about what their message was. The second thing will happen, and this will happen, and it's happened to all of us, you'll write an article, you'll send it for what we call copy editing. Just make sure there's a capital letter and the punctuation is correct. And it comes back and it doesn't look anything like the article you wrote. Now that is what you call, there's a technical term for that, and the technical term is bloody irritating. So, no, it really is. So what's happened there? What's happened is the writer that you sent away for copy editing has seen a different angle, or thinks they can write in a more compelling voice, or thinks they've got a way of presenting it better. Your job is then to work with that person and say, oh, I see you changed it in this following way. Can you just talk me through some of those changes? What made you think that that was an appropriate change? Because if you wrote that article, you have to be comfortable that that article was correct, that that article reflects truly what you wanted to say. And it may turn out that, in fact, you weren't being very clear. And as Andrew has kindly pointed out, you might have said 14 times and repeated yourself and changed the subject abruptly, as I have done tonight. And your copy editor might actually be doing you a favor and making your message a little bit clearer. But you do have to work with that person to make it the best article possible. Okay, let's have a look here. This one says something, something, something. Oh, bloody irritating. Yes, thank you, Andrew. Blame the interviewee? No way. What about intentional sensationalization? Well, did they spell your name right? And if they spelled your name right, fantastic, because if it's sensationalized, that means more people will read it. And if people are reading it, that's fantastic. Now, one of the things that you can do if you are being interviewed, what I used to do as a journalist, and what I really recommend that you do, is at the end of the article, or at the end of the interview, you say, I know what I said. What I'd like to hear from you is, what did you hear me say? What do you think the angle is going to be for your article? And then they will tell you. And then you'll be able to say, I think it might be stronger if you did it this way. You see, you can't tell the journalist what to do because they're the journalist. But you can say, I think that this might be more relevant for your target audience. Or what do you think about this as an angle? And you work together with the journalist. If you take the journalist and you say, I don't want to do it this way, and you become a difficult person to interview, the journalist will just move swiftly on to the next name in their little black book. And then you don't get the next interview at all because you get a reputation for being difficult to interview and being a difficult person to work with. That's the last thing you want, I promise you. Oh, am I distorting? I beg your pardon. I shall just slow down. This says, only works if everybody works it. We tried the last TM year. Okay, sorry, that's about the Facebook group. I want to wrap up now. What I'd like you to do, please, is tell me, is there anything that I haven't covered that you would like to cover? And also, what is your summary, please? What is the summary of what you got out of tonight? What are you really going to take away from you, from this evening?
David, at least Erich, can I ask you something?
I'm listening.
When
Yes,
when we were chatting on our first conversation, you told me some interesting facts. You said on such and such a day, these newspapers write about businesses. On such and such a day, they write about that. And I found that very, very good. So we could target.
Thank you, yes.
I loved that.
Thank you. So if you think about a newspaper we think of as a newspaper, right? But in fact, a newspaper is a collection of weekly magazines as well. So on a Thursday, there's always the motoring supplement. In Business Day, on Wednesday, it's the management supplement. I can't remember what. Oh, on Thursday, it's also the IT supplement in the Business Day. So in the Star, there's the motoring supplement. On Mondays and Wednesdays, it's the job supplement. So if you look at the newspaper, try and look at also the different supplements or sections. In Afrikaans, die bydra, of die wat? Ek weet dan nie meer nie. Anyway, these are the little supplements that go into the newspaper or the sections, and those you can think of in a strange way as a weekly magazine that's of a 1 page or 2 pages that's inside. I've had very good success targeting the jobs supplement. That job mail really needs, not job mail, the careers in the independent newspapers. They really are very keen for content, and we've got a lot to say to people who are looking for jobs. Then the next person also said, about the international branding. Please be aware that Toastmasters has specific fonts and very specific colors. There is a brand manual available on the Toastmasters.org website. Please use the correct colors. Please also be aware that all your programs need to be written in the Arial font, not the Cambria font, which is the current default for Word. It has to be Arial. That is the Toastmasters font. What we're trying to do at Toastmasters is to get a consistent brand experience. So if I go to Umhlanga Toastmasters, I get exactly the same experience as if I go to the Toastmasters in Zimbabwe. They're called Superior Toastmasters, Supreme Toastmasters. Andrew? So if I go to Supreme Toastmasters in Umhlanga, or if I go to Chuckle and Chirp in Cape Town, or if I go to Umhlanga Toastmasters Club, I get the same brand experience so that I know I'm part of the same organization. That's incredibly key. We're really trying to professionalize our branding. So some of the, thank you so much, some of the ideas about the summary. Think clearly about your audience. How do you capture your audience? You bring in conflicts and visual things. Here's an idea. A high proportion of IT managers are also Toastmasters. So, I don't know if that's true, but you might want to look at that. So do a little bit of research and quote facts and figures. Facts and figures are very, very good at building credibility. So I want to, here you go, creating a calendar so you can have hooks around the year. Very, very good idea, very good idea. Now, I want to close now. Does somebody want to say something before I close?
Erich, I just posted. I just quickly want to know if you can just have some guidelines concerning word counts for articles, for news or for features or anything like that, just to give guidelines. And then also, what was the other one? Talking about social media like Twitter and Facebook, what is the optimum time to place something onto Facebook that you get the maximum amount of people looking at it?
Thank you for those two. Word counts. For news, you're looking at 400 to 600 words. For a feature, you're looking at 500 to 800 words. I don't know what that is in pages, but 400 to 600 words for news, you can't go longer than that. No ways. For a feature, 800 words is a lot. But what you can do is you can also ask the magazine, if you're writing for a magazine, how to write a wedding speech for Men's Health, for example. You can say to them, listen, what kind of word count are you looking at? And they'll tell you 150 words. That's what they told me. So those give you a little bit of a guideline. Another thing you can do is count the number of words in the newspaper that you're targeting. So always make sure that you read a couple of issues of the newspaper or magazine that you're targeting before you submit articles. It's insulting otherwise, because you're just going to be off target. In terms of social media, I have found Thursdays work well for Twitter, but there are lots of analytic tools. Twitter has its own analytic tool. There's one called Crowdfire, which does Twitter analytics. There is some limited functionality which is free, and I'm pretty sure Facebook has got analytics as well. I'm not sure about the Facebook analytics, but for your blog posts, Google has analytics, so you can have a look at these. You just Google the word analytics and then Facebook. Oh, there you are. Clout. Clout is it's a reputation scoring system that obviously is branched out into Facebook. So you just have to like make a note. I would suggest that you make a note and track it. I posted this on Thursday at 11 o'clock. How many follows did I get, or how many tweets did I get? And you'll just start learning a pattern for sure. Yes, you do. You do get reports on Facebook pages. You're absolutely right, Karen. When I was running the District 74 Facebook page, you can actually see what the reach was, and you can see it by day. It says here, Ben Roberts says, if you get over 100 likes on Facebook, then they'll give you analytics. And I'm pretty sure we are up there because I've actually accessed those analytics, certainly for the Toastmasters page. I want to close now. Does anybody want to say something before I close?
Yes, please. I've got a question.
Listening.
Okay, I understand like what we've learned in Toastmasters. When giving a speech, you should have a captivating introduction and a body that has 3 points, or about 3 points that will stay in the audience's mind, and then obviously you have your conclusion. Is there any format in which we should write articles that captivate the audience? Like, where should the suspense be open? Is it in the final paragraph? Is it in the second last paragraph? Have you got any tips of those sorts?
Thank you, Shakshi. Yes, and thank you so much for raising that. Absolutely. In a speech, we're inclined to finish with a strong call to action. So you can't do that when you're writing, because what people will sometimes do is they will chop the end off your article. So you need to get all the relevant information. You have to cram your first 2 or 3 paragraphs full of the relevant information. So the way we talk about it in journalism is what we call an inverted pyramid. An inverted pyramid or an upside down triangle. So I'm making that with my hands. And the idea there is that the most important stuff is at the top of the triangle. So the where, when, how, who, what. So Rob Douglas has achieved Toastmasters' highest award, one of only 10 people this year, called the Distinguished Toastmaster. He achieved this, says Rob Douglas. I wish I had found Toastmasters 20 years earlier. I owe the success of my career to Toastmasters, close quotes. The Distinguished Toastmasters Award is only given out to people who have spent as much time preparing and delivering speeches and leading teams as the typical MBA graduates covers in their 2-year course. Now that's 3 paragraphs, right? And I've said everything I need to say. And then I can go on to Rob Douglas's career and where Rob Douglas lives and how often he picks his nose and all of that. There is in fact, oh there you go, there is in fact a publicity manual. They've updated it quite nicely. I've done it twice. I did it some time ago and I did it slightly more recently. The publicity manual is very good. There's an advanced manual on that. Thank you, Shakshi. That's very, very good. I want to close now. Does somebody want to say something before I close?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I wanted to thank Erich very much. So tell me when everybody's finished before we can say thank you and give you a huge round of applause.
Okay, so I'm going to close now, and then you can thank me and give me a huge round of applause. I'm going to close by saying the following thing.
Yes.
No, wait. Andrew's saying, please work on my gap fillers. Thank you, Andrew. He's a bit of a comedian, is Andrew. Now, I want to say the following thing, and this is very important. The first thing I want to say is I have never seen a team of people rally around a cause like I have tonight with Toastmasters. Margie, your organizational skills and your ability to infect us with your enthusiasm is astonishing and legendary. This team has the ability really to change the face of Toastmasters as we know it. It's always been the best kept secret. We make that joke a lot. And after this year, it's not going to be the best kept secret anymore. Louis, I am humbled and delighted that you decided to take on this job as the publishing manager for Toastmasters International. You are going to do a great job, I know it. Please lean on me whenever you need me. You've got my phone number. We live around the corner from each other. I'm yours to command, my man. And I would love to see this team thrive. And I would love to be part of this team as well in whatever small way I can be. Finally, please remember that you're doing this for yourselves as well. Remember that all of the skills you're learning here tonight, all of the skills that you learn when you write an article and it doesn't get published, because that happens a lot. You'll write an article, it won't get published. Every time you improve that article, it gets better, and after a while you'll start seeing your hit rate gets bigger. You're doing this for yourself, and you're learning how to be resilient in the face of rejection and how to improve your writing skills. And as you do that, remember there's a lot in it for you. And finally, Toastmasters is a team sport. Don't prepare your speeches in isolation. Don't prepare your articles in isolation. Bounce ideas off each other. That's what the team is for. I look forward to the success of this team. The success of this team is going to change the face of Toastmasters forever. I am convinced of it. Toastmasters will never get so much publicity as it will this year. I am convinced of it, and it's thanks to people like Margie and Louis. And I can't thank you enough for being there, and all of you on this call, for being so willing to publicize this wonderful organization. Thank you so much. and I really look forward to your success. Over.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erich. As Erich has mentioned, which hasn't been officially announced, and I did ask Erich to tell you, Louis Nageri, who is a South African champion speaker, did I say that wrong? Nagini is a South African champion speaker in humorous evaluations, table topics, and he is going to be leading this team and helping us with the publishing of it. It was only decided last week, so we are very excited about that, and you're going to be hearing a lot more from Louis. And we want to say an enormous thank you for Erich on his holiday to be taking time out to work with us, to train us, to inspire us. And we couldn't have wished for anyone better to have led our first session for the 2015 and 2016 training of our VPPRs and writers. So can we give Erich the hugest round of applause? Put your microphones on and give him a huge clap. All microphones on for the applause, please. And whoa! Thank you, Erich. Enjoy the rest of your holiday.
I shall do, and thank you so much for a lovely evening, and have a lovely week.